Introducing Sony's original RX100. This was the very first RX100, the Mark I as it's now known. Sony was pretty consistent in updating this line almost every year starting in 2012 up to the current model in 2019. It just stopped. But how far have we come? How does the original compare to the RX100 MK7? Along with the increase in features, there was an increase in size and weight. The MK7 is wider, kind of bigger, chunkier. Now they're both pocketable. Here the RX100 MK7 does fit in a pants pocket, but it leaves you with a little bulge, not in a good way. And the RX100 MK1 sort of just slides in and kind of disappears. But can the Mark I take good pictures by today's standards? We're going to look at that. Maybe you'll decide you're interested in this kind of vintage point and shoot. Some of these results may be a little surprising. So stay tuned. You're going to learn a little bit in this video, and you may actually have some fun along the way as we take a hands-on look at the RX100 original model. Now, while both cameras have a 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor, the difference is the 7 has a stack sensor, allowing it to do faster autofocus and faster burst. Over the years, the zoom range on the RX100's changed, but the original went out to 100 millimeters, and by the time we got to the 7, it went out to 200 millimeters. But that comes at the cost of a slower lens, and we're going to look at that in a second. But first, let's take a look at what that zoom range actually looks like. This is the wide angle at 28, and here is the zoom at 100. So you get a nice zoom range, and that fast lens is great for low light. But are these aperture numbers on the Mark I a bit of a sleight of hand? Let's look. At 28 millimeters, you're at f1.8 true. But look what happens when you start zooming. Even when you get just a smidge past 28 millimeters, look, you're at f2. And by the time you get to 35 millimeters, a common focal length, you're at f2.8, already more than a full stop slower. And it continues. Your aperture values start to get slower very quickly. By the time you hit 70 millimeters, you're at f4, which is exactly what the Mark VII is at 70 millimeters. And when you get to the longer end of the zoom, actually the aperture on the Mark VII is faster. So here in a low light room, this is the Mark I, and you can actually see the wide angle difference as the Mark VII has a wider angle at 24 versus 28. At full zoom, the Mark I couldn't even get a steady shot. The Mark VII is so much better. So low light, I think, is better on the Mark VII. The Mark I came out at a price of $650, which actually seems kind of reasonable by today's standards. And when the Mark VII came out in 2019, Sony released it for $1198. But very quickly thereafter, they raised it another $100 for some reason to $1298. Is it a good deal at that price?
It's actually kind of expensive.
Perhaps. But let's see how this RX100 Mark I, which came out at half the price of the Mark VII, can do today. You talking to me? Do we dare compare how these two cameras, separated by 7 years of technology, compare to one another? Well, let's do that in front of the world's largest store, Macy's. Here is the RX100 original wide angle compared to the RX100 VII. And here they are, both taken at 100 millimeters to compare apples to apples. I find them to be pretty close. I think there was maybe just a little more contrast, a little more sharpness in the RX100 VII. Here's the Empire State Building with the RX100 I Comparing it to the 7, I would say the same thing. It's a little brighter and cleaner with the 7. Not a big difference though. Here, my favorite store, may not be the world's biggest store, but it's my favorite camera store. Here it's taken with the RX100 VII versus the 1. Again, they're very similar. Not a huge difference comparing them side by side. The 7's just a little brighter and maybe more contrast. But out in the real world, a big difference is the zoom reach. Here is the Mark 7 at 200 millimeters. You can see this woman in the red. And at 100 millimeters, she's like way in the distance in comparison. Here's just another shot indoors with the Mark 7. I think just looks a little sharper than the Mark 1. Now, this shot here taken with the Mark 1 of this vintage, expensive camera at B&H, I actually bought this.
Oh, you must be really rich.
Hey, you're no dummy. You're not going to buy that. But here is just a comparison again of this dummy at the store. I may have had the flash intensity set differently on these two shots, but you get an idea of how they look. The older Mark 1 has a thick screen. It doesn't tilt like the 7 does here, and that's convenient for street photography for getting low angles. And if you want to use a viewfinder on the 7, you can just pop one right up. There's been a lot of strides in autofocus over those 7 years, and the 7 has a more sophisticated autofocus. Here's the 7 in action. I'm trying to confuse the autofocus. Not an easy task because it finds my eye, and as soon as I put the coaster in front of the camera, now we're going to switch to the recorded video for you to see clearer. It really focuses in on that coaster and then goes back to my eye, back to the coaster very confidently. Let's see if the 1 can match that. Now, it doesn't see my eye. There's no little square around my eye, but there is around my face. If I cover my face, yes, it does recognize it right away when it comes back. Now, when I put the coaster, switching to the recorded clip, it's slower to go back and forth between the coaster. See, it hunted just there. Definitely not as responsive as the 7 was. That's because the Mark 1 is just using contrast, whereas the Mark 7 uses a combination of contrast and phase detect. And the Mark 7 shoots double the burst rate, 20 frames per second versus 10. The Mark 1 has a closer focusing distance, which seems strange, so I actually tested this on my Tony the Tiger statue, and this confirms that, yes, you can get in a little tighter with the Mark 1 from Macro. Coming up, shots taken with both cameras, including side-by-side comparisons. If you just be kind enough to hit that like and subscribe button, it really does help this growing channel, which showcases old tech, new tech, and oldish tech and newish tech. And if you're interested in buying the RX100 MK7, which you can still buy new as of the making of this video, I actually have a link in the description. I get a small commission on that, but it doesn't cost you anything, but it does help the channel. Much appreciated. Some other tech improvements in the 7 is better image stabilization, 4K 30 video, a higher ISO. They both have clear image zoom, but the 7 offers high frame rates and slow motion. Showing its age, when you go into the menu, you have options for 60i or 60p. Do you know what 60i is? I bet a lot of you don't. That's actually interlaced, which isn't even used anymore. If you want to shoot MP4, it's not even a 1920 by 1080 option. So you have to shoot an AVCHD format, which is an older format, to get the best quality 1080p video. And here it is with the Mark 1. This is in wide angle, and I'm going to show you now in full telephoto. You can get an idea of the stabilization. This is being handheld. And now we'll compare it to the Mark 7 at 100 millimeters stabilization as well. You see a lot more detail in that 4K video. And of course, you can get in much tighter here at 200 millimeter equivalent with the Mark 7. Does clear image zoom work even if you only shoot 1080p video? Take a look. This looks like it's around full optical zoom here. And this is clear image zoom. Not looking too clear, but the good news is in photos it works better. Here's wide angle, here's full optical zoom, and this is clear image zoom, a much better result. One more time, here is wide angle, this is the full optical 100 millimeters, and this is the full clear image zoom. Now another little trick the Mark I can do is actually take a photo while you're shooting video. So here I am recording video and you press the shutter button, you see the capture lights up. So here I am trying it out, taking a picture of this hedge. And what I didn't realize is even after you hit the capture button, it doesn't interrupt the recording process. I thought it stopped recording. But here is the end result. What do you think? I mean, it's not bad, not great, not bad.
It's not good or bad. It is.
You can also add some filters or some funky little picture effects. They're kind of hokey, but let's take a look. This is illustration. This is watercolor. This is rich tone mono. This is high contrast mono. Partial color green. So I guess it takes the green, only shoots the green. So now can you use these in movie mode? Let's see. Maybe you can. Yeah, because the sky is black and white, and you only see the green. Look how cool that is.
Cool.
Here's a retro photo. Let's check it out. Retro photo. Let's do a retro photo selfie. See how it works. Do I look retro or do I look orange? Posterize? Are you kidding me? Oh my God. Let's selfie posterize. We got a selfie posterize.
Please, don't.
This is toy camera. Oh, that's kind of cool. But it doesn't have the real useful features like a mic jack, which the RX100 VII has. The 7 has a time-lapse intervalometer. No 4K 30, you can't shoot in any S-Log or HDR modes. Or Bluetooth, so you won't even be able to use the app. But a simple feature, which I find a little annoying, they both have a flash, but with the Mark I, you have to go into a menu to activate the flash, whereas in the Mark VII, there's a hard button, so it's a little more spontaneous if you want to use the flash. But that's not a really big deal. Look, if you want a point-and-shoot camera with a nice zoom and you don't want to spend more than $1,000, you may want to consider the RX100 original model and look no further than eBay because you can find them on there. I got mine for about $300 in good working condition with actually the original box and accessories, which is a pretty good deal considering it was less than half the price of when it was first introduced. But a camera like this, which looks a lot like an RX100 Mark 7 or Mark 0, goes for a lot more because it's a little more hard to find. This one, the HX99, has a really long zoom, and I plan on reviewing that to see what this is all about. This has a small sensor though. But stay tuned and subscribe, and you can check that out. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh.